If you had $1 billion, would you still work? What if you had 134 billion? You know what they all say. The first billion is the hardest. But seriously, after a few billion, can any amount of money change your lifestyle? So why work so hard? Why not just retire to your private island and soak up the sun? And yet, these mega wealthy people seem to work very hard. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett. Let's take Bill Gates as an example. In addition to trying to push vaccines into the arms of every human on Earth, he is now the largest individual investor of farmland in the United States to the tune of 270,000 acres. My guess is that he doesn't make investment decisions casually. So what's his strategy? Why is he buying all this land now? In this episode of the Land.MBA podcast, David and I are going to dig into Bill Gates' land portfolio and attempt to discern his strategy and what it could mean to the rest of us aspiring billionaires.
If there's one thing I've learned in my business career, it's that I don't have all the answers. Look, I'm an ambitious guy, and I like to make progress fast. The secret to achieving success fast is to harness the brain power of other people in the community. That's what the Land.MBA Smart Bar is all about. As veteran investor Jesse Marchand said, the Smart Bar gave me the motivation and knowledge I needed to push through the tough times and accelerate my path to success. Seven-figure investor Mitch Milan likes to say, there's one meeting each week that I never miss. It's the Land.MBA Smart Bar. It's like happy hour with my land investing buddies. I always learn something. So if you want to network with like-minded people, make new friends, learn heaps, get questions answered, answer questions for others, learn new strategies, get accountability, and overall get inspired while having a great time, check out the Land.MBA Smart Bar. For a short time, podcast listeners can get 20% off the annual plan, which comes to an insane $86 per month. Compare this to other programs which charge $250 a month or more. This is hands down the best deal you're going to find and the best way to invest in your success. So don't wait. Please go to land.mba/mastermind. That's land.mba/mastermind and use promo code podcast22 to join today.
Hey, what's going on, Mr. Zonder?
Hello, Dave. Hello, all you gorgeous entrepreneurial land barons. This is Howard Zonder, partner Dave Van Steenkis, and this is the Land.MBA podcast. Happy you could join us today. We hope you'll take a moment and like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, subscribe, but do comment. We'd love to hear from you. And that is not your typical background, Dave. Where are you?
I am in, I would say sunny Southern California, but it's early morning. We got a little bit of ocean overcast coming in from off the ocean, just over in Escondido, staying at a resort. And just on vacation for about a week with my daughter and her friend, and we're having a good time.
All right. Well, since breaking my foot, I am on my staycation. So
nice. All that cost and maintenance of a pool for a 2-month window per year, right?
For a 2-month window, and now I got a broken foot. Oh well, what are you gonna do? So yeah, I spent a month in San Diego when I was in college as part of my military training, and it was called Corpsman, and it's part of the Navy ROTC. So we would do a week with aviation, or a week with surface ships, a week with submarines, a week with aviation, and then a week with the Marines. And so when it came to aviation week, it was just that way. I mean, we would have to wait. We would just be on standby all morning because every morning it was just complete overcast. All this fog was coming in, and the planes couldn't take off. We had to wait for it to burn off, and then it was beautiful by the second half of the day, but the morning was always overcast.
Nice. Yeah. I went to school at Cal State Long Beach. So, back in I remember, the June gloom. I was living down here. June is sometimes it takes till 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon for it to burn off. The rest of the summer's beautiful, but sometimes you get that June gloom, and it's like, oh, beach in the afternoon. So,
Weather's
all right,
interesting.
what do we?
In Miami, it pours for 15 minutes every day at 3 o'clock, like clockwork. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, what
yeah,
are we
let's get
talking about today?
yeah, let's talk about the big man. I've had some activity on my Facebook page about this. It actually garnered a lot of comments, and it was all about the fact that Bill Gates is now the largest individual owner of farmland in the United States, with a clocking in at a whopping 270,000 acres. Um, and interestingly enough, one of the first comments on that post was, yeah, there's about 900 million acres of farmland in the United States. So, let's do the percentage on that. Is this really important? Is this really a big deal? And so my view is that it is, but more importantly, my view is that Mr. Gates does not do anything casually. That if he's going to make an investment of that size, he's got a reason for it. And it would be good to understand what his strategy is, both as an American, but also as a land investor, because maybe there's something we can learn since he's buying lots of land.
Right. Right. What can we learn? I think we're going to get into that a little bit, but it's very interesting to see um, how much he's buying, and then you start to think about the other activities that he's involved in with his foundation and whatnot with regards to vaccines. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that, a lot of different opinions around that. So tell us more.
Yeah, well, I think I put this into the intro a little bit. If you've got $134 billion, as Mr. Gates does, do you really need to work? I mean, really, nothing you're going to do is going to change your lifestyle that much. So obviously, something else is motivating him and others of that level of wealth. And maybe it's part of it is ego. Maybe part of it is, well, the number is just a scorecard, and now my competition is the other uber wealthy people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and others. Or maybe he's sort of at that level right now that he's in the club of people who are saying, our job is to figure out how to move the human race to the next level of evolution, whatever that looks like in terms of government or technology or moving off the planet or whatever it is. And so when I see Bill Gates doing anything, it seems like he's not looking to just make money. He's looking to reinvent industries, not dissimilar to what Elon Musk does a lot of time. I mean, Elon Musk was trying to reinvent the auto industry through Tesla. He was trying to reinvent our approach towards space through SpaceX. Bill Gates, the same thing. And I think, based upon things that he said, one of the things, in addition to healthcare, if you will, that in industry where he wants to reinvent it, is farming and food supply. So this could definitely be part of that larger endeavor.
Yeah, interesting. Food supply. What kind of changes do you think he's wants to do? I know he's got a big interest in getting us off of meats and plant-based foods. There's a biofuel play here. Tell us a little about what your thoughts are on those.
Well, before we get into a full analysis on the strategy, I thought maybe it's just interesting to look at where he's buying land.
All right,
So
so
he's
we've
got like,
got
yeah, go ahead.
we've got like 69,000 acres in Louisiana, 16,000 acres in Washington, 21,000 in Nebraska, 18,000 in Illinois, 48,000 in Arkansas, and more and more. Now there's some non-farmland he owns, small stake for him, about 25,000 acres in Arizona. And that apparently is something that's designated to build a smart city, a town called Belmont. Interesting. It's actually not that far west of Phoenix.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Let's not forget that 1 acre in New Mexico. I'd really be
that's
interested
true.
to know
That's
what
true.
that 1 acre is and what that's all about.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he was just vacationing in New Mexico one year and said, ah, that's a nice looking piece of property. I'll buy
Yeah, maybe that's where the UFO landed. I don't know, but
that.
the 16,000 in Washington. I mean, obviously he knows Washington's. That's predominantly farmland. Nebraska predominantly farmland. Illinois predominantly farmland. Arkansas 69,000 in Louisiana. Louisiana is interesting because Louisiana is like one of the most productive farm areas for both rice and soybeans. And in the United States, by far the vast majority of rice and soybeans grown is all GMO. And Bill Gates is a big advocate of GMO foods. So interesting that he's buying there.
Very
Um,
interesting. If you want to look like a wrinkled up, ugly troll like Bill, eat lots of GMO foods.
yeah, it's interesting, like Bezos is now trying to look like Superman. He's trying to work on his six pack, and Bill Gates is like, yeah, I don't care. I'm gonna let that belly grow. Used to be a
There
pretty
was a
skinny.
Yep, yep. There was a Rogan podcast, and he was bashing on Bill because he's pushing all these plant-based meats, meat replacements, and Rogan's just like, dude, you look like shit. You're an old fat ass. You're gonna preach to us about health and food.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm
So,
uh,
so he
I'm
preaches
going
about
down
it.
another rabbit trail, but
No, no, that was actually good. So, the firm, one of his firms, Cascade, I think it's Cascade or Cascadia Investments, is the firm that's behind all these land purchases, and they're also invested in Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat or whatever the other company is. So I think that's actually one of the potential uses of this land is to support the meat alternative industry. Definitely, it would make sense that that would be one of the goals because they're uh, related investments.
yep.
Um, but the interesting thing, Louisiana, Washington, Nebraska, Illinois, these are places all that have one thing in common. Nebraska may be a bit of an outlier here, but they all have a lot of water. And
Mhm.
and the Southwest is it's going through a massive drought. I've heard it called a like 1,200-year drought. In fact, I
Yeah.
just saw something this morning about Lake Mead. They were showing NASA was showing pictures from space on how Lake Mead has shrunk. It is now at the point where, I mean, Lake Mead is very close to getting so low that they're going to have to turn off electrical power generation. And they're worried that in a certain number of years it could turn into what they call a dead pool, which is it won't provide any water. I mean, it is a major provider of water to Arizona and California, and they're worried that no water will be going downstream. It's just going to be a dead pool. So
Wow.
uh,
That's catastrophic.
absolutely catastrophic. And then you were telling me something really interesting about cattle in Texas. What was that?
Yeah, I just saw I haven't it was just an Instagram post this morning, and I haven't verified everything, but there was some interviews with ranchers and whatnot. There was footage of cars back. I'm sure you could look it up. I hadn't taken the time yet, but I just saw it this morning, and I didn't have any reason to doubt it. So take that with a grain of salt. But we do know that Texas is having a massive drought, as well the entire Southwest. But so apparently, currently there is a massive cattle sell-off by ranchers where their cattle aren't quite ready for market yet. They still need to be fed, and only about 20% of the grazing land is even grazable at this point in the entire state. So ranchers are, selling off before their cattle die. So they're basically blowing it out to, people coming in from out of state with their trucks to truck them out of there so they can bring them to land that has good grazing land. And
Hmm.
so, the person who was doing the video was talking about, hey guys, stock up on food. We keep hearing about all these food shortages from multiple different reasons. And so it looks like we may have a short-term dip on beef prices as they get all this cattle ready for market and try to blow it out, and then it's going to skyrocket because there's nothing coming behind it to replace it. And the stuff that does come behind it to replace it, there's the feed prices are going to be much higher, so the cost of the beef is going to be much higher. But anyway, it's all back related to drought.
Interesting.
So yeah,
So
but
buy farmland where there's a lot of water. That's the key.
I think that's what we're
Buy land, period, where you've got access to water. I mean, our business has been so focused on the Southwest for so long, the West and Southwest,
mhm,
and clearly the average American has not gotten the word on this drought because population shifts are still moving. It's south and southwest, but to the degree it's going southwest, I mean, you've got these cities, Las Vegas and Phoenix, that are just growing and growing, and they are really at risk for water. So,
yeah,
as we said in our last podcast, quoting the great Wayne Gretzky, is don't skate to where the
puck
puck is,
is
where the puck is going, and it's just a matter of time before people are going to realize what's going on out there. I think the South is going to become a lot more attractive, and the Southeast it will become attractive, and the Midwest, frankly, will. No
yeah,
state has more fresh water, or the state that has the most fresh water of all states is actually Michigan.
right. Yep,
And
you
now
got all the Great Lakes and
Michigan's shrinking from a population perspective.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where some of those shifts go. Um, and uh, the other thing is, when you look at stuff like drought, certainly you look at demand on the water supply, and I haven't looked at the trends in demand versus actual, rainfall and snow and water capture and all of that. But I remember being in California here now. I remember growing up here, and living through several drought years, and time, and the sky is falling, and it's going to take, I remember lakes being so low, and the experts saying it'll take 10 years of normal rainfall to fill this lake up. And then you have a year, and I remember this happening 2 or 3 times through my childhood and growing up here, where you'd have one season, 2 weeks, boom, everything was full because you just have nonstop rain for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And once the ground gets saturated, everything runs off, and it just like whoop, and then we get incredible snowpack in the mountains, and it's back to normal like that. The thing they do poorly here is water capture. They haven't built any water capture infrastructure in 40 years, and I don't, we can go down on other conspiratorial paths on that.
I did
But
recently read that water systems and water delivery systems have about a 30% water retention, and the rest of the 70% is either evaporated away or it leaks away. So all that water coming out of the Colorado River Basin out to Arizona and Nevada and California, only about 30% of it actually finds its way to the end user, from what I understand, which is amazing.
wow,
Which is one of the, I think, the things that Bill Gates is trying to address in Belmont, Arizona, as he builds that out, because obviously he's building a smart city in the middle of the desert at a time of drought when there's not a lot of water. So, how's that going to work out? Or when will it work out? Who knows? But I do think that pushing GMO crops, pushing uh, just a shift away. It's interesting that as we are suffering under very, very high gas prices, one of the solutions that President Biden came up with was to increase the ethanol content of of gas from 10% to 20%, which will probably kill a lot of engines or certainly shorten their lifespan, which is what he wants because he wants to get gas cars off the road and replace them with EVs. But the other thing it does is it shifts corn production away from something like feed for
Like
cattle.
feeding cattle,
Exactly. And
right?
puts it into basically creates a biofuel to put into cars. So that's a possibility as well too. And in fact, Bill Gates talks about this. He talked about biofuels and how important that is. From what I've been able to gather, about 2% of the world of anthropomorphic carbon emissions, which anthropomorphic man-made carbon emissions, comes from aviation. And there's a strong move afoot to have planes move to biofuels. And in fact, Boeing has said that I think by 2030 or 2050, they want to have like 100% of their products will be working off of biofuels as opposed to fossil fuels. So clearly, I think based upon what he said, that's one of the goals that Bill Gates has through all this farmland is to produce biofuels. So I have a feeling that these purchases are part of more of some different vertical strategies to solve problems, whether it's biofuels or whether it's to reinvent the food industry and food supply chains, all these things. And you don't have to own all of it to make that change. I was thinking, what's a good way to talk about this as well? John Dutton in Yellowstone, which is, of course, ultimate truth. It's interesting that
Right.
he's the largest farmer or largest ranch holder in Montana, and he's also the livestock commissioner. So when you've got a lot of assets and you wield a lot of power, you can turn that into some government or regulatory power and make government work for you. And that's something that Bill Gates has been doing for a very long time. He's very attuned to making government work for him. And so it's fascinating to me that he's got 69,000 acres in Louisiana, but he doesn't have any that's showing up at least in North Carolina and or South Carolina rather, South Carolina. And the reason that's interesting is because last summer I spent some time down in Charleston and I understand the geography of South Carolina a whole lot better now. So the whole 100 miles, on the eastern side of South Carolina are just big alluvial plains. There's no rocks, no nothing. It's just designed for plantation style farming. And the cash crop, the majority crop historically, at least in during from revolutionary times on through the Civil War and probably beyond, has been rice. It has, we normally think tobacco and things like that in the South, but it was actually
Yeah.
rice. And it's fascinating to me that he would buy 69,000 acres in Louisiana, but nothing in South Carolina. And my guess is that that has something to do with the regulatory environment in those states.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I I think with biofuels, I think it's interesting to look at vertical farming as well, with the hydroponic type farming, and what's going to happen with that. And I think especially with regards to biofuels, although that's a little bit different topic because it doesn't require that much land. You just go vertical with it, and some just as a side note, some great advantages to that. I got real excited when I started learning about it. I thought, gosh, you can build vertically. It might even be a way to repurpose buildings in the city that were once, office buildings that they don't have use for anymore after COVID. And then,
Oh,
it's
balls that nobody uses anymore because they buy everything off of Amazon.
right, exactly. but
That's
it's right. You can do it right in the city. You have less transport costs. You have less environmental impact. Your water can just get reused. You don't have the evaporation of your water. Um, so there's some really interesting advantages to it.
yeah, very very much so. Um,
So
well,
how
let's
do
talk about something else too, because what's when I look at a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world, I have a simple view of life. When something doesn't make any sense, it's because I don't understand the true agenda.
yeah,
And
yeah,
uh, I'll give you an example of something that doesn't make any sense. So the Netherlands is one of the most productive farming food producers in Europe. And the government is basically pushing policies that are going to shut down the majority of farms in the Netherlands in the name of climate change. So they're forcing them to not use chemical fertilizers, and in order to lower nitrogen in the soil, I think is what it is. And I've spent a lot of time in the Netherlands, and one thing you can say about the Netherlands is they are bought into the whole globalist socialist model of governance. They're very smart people. They're great people, but they're very they're not they're like they're halfway between socialism and capitalism. I remember I was there on a business trip with my company, and I was at our Dutch office, and we were just about to go over 50 people, and they were having this the HR person was there and saying, okay, once we go over 50, we're going to by law we're going to have to create a workers council, and the workers council you'll elect people to be on that council, and they'll participate in strategy development and evaluating mergers and acquisitions, and I'm like, what? That doesn't sound right. But that's how they operate there. I mean, if somebody can call up in the Netherlands and say, my boyfriend broke up with me, and I'm just not mentally capable of coming into work, and you cannot come to work for months at a time, and they still can't fire you. So there's
that was similar in Sweden. I had a couple of employees when I was working there that, yeah,
but on the other hand, I found that everybody that I worked with there that actually showed up at the office really was smart, knowledgeable. They worked hard and they cared about what they were doing, much more so. And it's a much more homogenistic kind of society than the United States is. So I believe the farmers there, believe in what they're doing. They love what they do, and they want to work hard, and they want to grow the food, and they take pride in it. And so, but they also, as a culture, generally support their government, because their government is like the majority of the economy. I think at least 50% of their earnings goes back to the government for social programs. So for any aspect or any class of society in the Netherlands to rebel it's a big deal. And
yeah,
we're hearing stories now how they're smearing government buildings with manure, and I mean they're really fighting back against this
tyranny.
this tyranny. And it makes me say, what's driving this? And then we've got Joe Biden saying we're going to increase ethanol content in fuel from 10% to 20%. That doesn't make any sense. Not only does that hurt the cars, but it also diverts food supply at a time when you're telling us we're going to have food shortages. So
Yeah,
what's going on with this? It means we don't understand the agenda. I believe the agenda is the agenda. And by that, I mean the United Nations Agenda 2030, which is driving all of this. And through all
yeah,
these globalist organizations, it is telling them what the targets are. And all of the leaders of companies that are bought into it have obligations to their peers in those Davos kinds of meetings to achieve certain targets by 2030, and along everything to do with that agenda. And Bill Gates is very much informed and involved with that as well too. And I think that's governing a lot of what he's doing, is to making sure that he's in a position to truly capitalize upon that. So less meat, the shift to plant-based meats, providing the vertical from farm to manufacturer for those plant-based meats, biofuels, growing the underlying product in order to be able to produce those biofuels. If you're creating a biofuel, one of the things you're going to care about is having the greatest yield per acre you can get, which probably has something to do with his $27 million investment with Monsanto, because that's
Yeah.
what Monsanto does.
Yeah.
But there are other things that I think that Bill Gates does that are not quite as friendly to the environment. And one of the things that people like Bill Gates spend a lot of money on lawyers and accountants to do is tax avoidance. And farmland is a great tool for tax avoidance. If you know that carbon
Carbon
credit,
offsets. Yeah.
yep, we know carbon credits are coming. I mean, they've been talking about it heavily since the Obama administration. They may not be here yet, but they're definitely coming because the powers to be really, they're not giving up on this. But if you're going to have a carbon tax and you're amongst the wealthiest people in the world, you want to make sure that you're not going to be paying taxes. That's for the little guy. So you need
Sure.
to create regulations and laws that provide abilities for rich people to offset those taxes, and that's what farmland.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when these rich now get lambasted by the left, they can virtue signal. Yes, but I offset my carbon.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, farmland even as it stands today provides all kinds of tax benefits that will help with tax avoidance as well. So let's just sum up some of the strategies or some of the benefits of 270,000 acres of farmland.
Yeah.
One, uh, I think that Bill Gates, he's a smart guy. I think he sees that the stock market is a massive bubble, that bubble is about to burst. How far is it going to go? It's already starting, but we don't really know. So I think he's starting to shift portfolio away from paper stocks and paper assets into hard assets, of which farmland is historically a consistent uh, uh, way to investment.
Performer.
It's
Yeah.
an it's not a massive performer, but it's a consistent performer. And because it's a hard asset, there's an intrinsic value to it. So move investment away from paper into
And
assets.
and probably the best inflation hedge you can buy. Plus it
Absolutely.
cash flows.
And a cash.
You
That's
know,
the important
so
part. And it especially cash flows when other parts of your investment portfolio are the customers for it. So you've got to
exactly.
guarantee the
Yes.
customer, right?
Yeah. No collusion there.
Yeah. Well, there's vertical monopolies. So
Right.
then investing in hard assets. Then we've got the carbon offsets, other kinds of tax write-offs. We've got the farming, the desire to influence food production and control food supply as well as food supply chain. And I think there are ways that he's going to be able to do that by buying smart and buying in the right places where he can have much more influence at a state level, i.e., Louisiana versus North Carolina. And by the way, that's just a suggestion from it. I don't actually know the regulatory environment in Louisiana or North Carolina when it comes to farming, so I can't tell you that it's better. But it just strikes me that the fact that he's bought in one and not the other tells me that there's a reason for it. Um, so supporting plant-based meats, GMO foods, biofuels. So that's a number of different strategic angles that he can
Yeah.
be getting those 270,000 acres. My question to you, Dave, is what can we learn from that as land investors, and what's our takeaway as far as our strategies go to learn from Bill Gates?
Well, it's a great question. You can hypothesize many things, but I think that, we go back to just the conversation about water. And I would certainly recommend, at least for the short term, until we see the water situation improve, that we start looking at areas to where we know investing in land and in areas that we know um, they've got a good water supply, and where the puck might be going the next 10 years, and where the migration trends could shift. If this certainly, yeah, it's very worrisome about what's happening in the Southwest, and if this water trend continues and lasts a long time, I mean, my goodness, if it actually happens to where Lake Mead and Lake Powell cannot produce electricity, there's like 40 million people that could impact. Um, I don't even know how to fathom how you'd mitigate that right now. I mean, just from an electricity standpoint. Um, and so might be a place to avoid temporarily until we get some nice 2-week storm that makes everything normal again. um,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
listen
and
past with
droughts are always temporary, but you
yeah.
know, it is, you know, has the population grown in these drought prone areas to a point where maybe it's not sustainable until there's some massive changes, like improving the collection systems, improving the delivery systems, so that you get 90% of the water instead of 30% of the water that's even collected. Now you got collection issues on top of that, and then the drought exacerbates it. So and I'm certainly not an expert there, but I think versus instead of just belaboring this point too much, uh, water, water. Those are the three things you need to think about.
And as water becomes scarcer, is to understand what are the water rights and water precedents in each of these states, because they're all different.
Yeah,
Um, how water is allocated, and just at a state level, my understanding is that California has precedence over Arizona for the Colorado River water. Now, I think they're currently renegotiating a compact, and I think if they can't get to a resolution this month, I think the federal government's going to step in because there's a lot at stake here. But I was listening to one guy, I think it must have been on a podcast. He was a farmer in one of the valleys in California, and his father moved there in the 20s, and they've been a farming family there for a very long time. And he said, uh, there's the water, they set up a water council or whatever it was to manage the water, but it had been taken over by, I don't know, the state or the county, somewhere closer to LA. And they basically are taking the water, and they're not leaving anything for the farmers anymore, because it's so low that only if it gets above a certain level will they allocate water to the farmers. So his grandfather, I think it was his grandfather probably, that started this whole thing, and now the farmers up in that valley can't even get the water. So I think
yeah, it's a difficult situation, and then you look at other sort of micro issues within that. If you look at like the Central Valley of California, where most of our almonds come from, and talk about plant-based stuff. Almond milk is a huge thing. That's kind of the most popular milk out of all the plant-based milks.
mhm.
And I don't remember what the statistics are, but it's the amount of water that it takes to grow almonds is astronomical. It's a really huge water sucking crop. um I don't remember the statistics, but when I heard it, I was amazed. There's a huge monopoly on the almond groves here in California. But I digress. It's another rabbit trail.
I mean, water is the great topic. I mean, in Colorado, so much of the water rights were bought up by oil companies, because it takes a lot of water to do fracking, and they were doing a lot of fracking on the western slope, and they needed to get the water over to the western slope in order to do the fracking. And it's interesting now because there's a war on fossil fuels, so and I'm not quite sure what all that means. I mean, I think when this is my guess, is that if following the John D. Rockefeller model, you force all your competitors into near bankruptcy, and you offer them fair market value for their properties, right? So all the people that went out and said, "Oh, I'm going to make a fortune in fracking," and they get all this capital investment, they put it in there, and then During the Trump years, we've got all this oil. The global price of a barrel of oil goes way down below the cost of what it takes to frack. And so they were losing money in doing that, whereas it's like, I don't know, what is it, like $6 or $10 a barrel to pull oil out of the ground in Saudi Arabia? So anyway, I would imagine a lot of them were going bankrupt or near bankruptcy. Oil companies would buy up those properties. Now oil spikes up to $100+ per barrel, and they've got the water, and they own the water rights to be able to finish the fracking. However, we've got an administration right now that has declared war on fossil fuels. So I don't know what I'm just spouting here. I don't know what all of this means, but I just know that there are a lot of water rights in Colorado that are not going towards, residential development, if you will. And I don't know exactly what all that means.
And it's very difficult. I think water attorneys are some of the highest, if not the highest paid attorneys in Colorado. And it's, I live there. It's very, very difficult to get water, and for those of you out there also that are investing in land in Colorado, there's something that I only recently learned. And that is, we all talk about the rule of it has to be 35 acres to be able to know that you're going to be able to qualify for a well. Well, there's this caveat in there. It had to be platted before 1972 to have that guarantee. So check that. That's why I don't subdivide in Colorado, because of water. Even if you had a large swath, you say, well, okay, I got 400 acres, I'll just do 35 acre parcels. Well, you're not platting in 1972. You may not get water, and you're going to spend a lot of money getting those rights anyway. You still have to go buy the rights. It's a whole process, and it's expensive and it's costly, and the only people who win are the attorneys. So
such is life. It's always the attorney.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think
right.
we have covered this one, and a lot of ideas of why Bill Gates might be buying all this farmland, and some of the implications for us in terms of where we might want to be looking in terms of alternative states and counties to pursue our land investing for the changes that are coming in the world.
All right. Well, have a nice day, and everybody, hope you enjoyed this, and we hope you give us some comments on that. We would love to hear your feedback.
See you next time.
Adios.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, had a bit of fun, and walked away with some actionable insights that you can apply to your business. Dave and I have got some great content and interviews planned, so don't forget to rate and review, and of course subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If we mention any interesting links or tools, you'll find them in the show notes. To learn more about Land.MBA, visit our website at, wait for it, Land.MBA. See you next time on the Land.MBA podcast.